Good evening, welcome on India Tonight. I'm Vikram this Monday evening, the 24th of June 2024. On top of the week, we've got the state of Telangana offering this big loan waiver that goes out to farmers, and it could go up to 2 lakh rupees a farmer. It's not small. So states like Maharashtra also, we're expecting them because they're going into assembly elections as well, and the possibility of announcements of farm loan waivers rides high. So if that happens, what does it mean for credit discipline in the future? What is the impact on budgets both at the centre and the state? Are these really good for the economy at all? We've got experts in the house to discuss this on the show this evening. Well, looking at the kind of exposure to loans that farmers face, now Telangana has announced this farm loan waiver, which goes up to 2 lakh rupees for each farmer. Now, at the same time, we're talking about Jharkhand, which is also considering as a state to increase that kind of loan waiver for farmers. And farmers in Punjab too. They're welcoming this move and urging the centre and the state government to go ahead with farm loan waivers there. Now, the question that arises from all of this is how feasible are farm loan waivers in our economy? How is it beneficial for farmers? Are they as beneficial as we expect them to be in the long run? How much of an impact is there on the Indian economy, the kind of budgets that states and the centre present? So before we dive into that discussion with our guest tonight, let me connect with my colleague Snehi. She's here to tell us about the impact that these moves on giving out farm loan waivers have on the microfinance industry. Today, we've seen some stock-related impact come through as well. There were stocks like Equitas and Focus Finance, which took a hit in trade today. So there is a perception battle as well of how well the farm sector is doing. And because of that, it plays out on investor sentiment. Isn't that right, Snehi? Do put in focus for us these MFIs that have taken a hit today, and we're looking at the direct, perhaps, impact of the farm loan waivers that have taken place in Telangana at least.
Well, yes, so that's right. Telangana has announced a farm waiver, and they've approved a farm loan waiver of up to 2 lakh rupees for farmers in the state. And the cost of this loan waiver has quoted to be around 31,000 crore rupees. Reports also indicate that Jharkhand is a state that is contemplating to raise this loan waiver to 2 lakh rupees per farmer from the existing 40,000 that they have given. Now, what's the impact? Let's understand. Sentimentally, it's negative for the entire financial sector when it comes to various stakeholders like your microfinance institutes or your small finance banks that lend to this sector. Waivers impact the basic financial discipline, and this will also discourage genuine borrowers to repay their loans. Now, when we talk about exposure of these various financial institutions, our total scheduled commercial banks have an agricultural exposure of 1.1 lakh crore rupees in Telangana and roughly 13,000 crore rupees in Jharkhand. On the other side, PSU banks, they contribute 81% in Telangana and 60% in Jharkhand. So the exposure in both of these sectors is quite high. Also now talking about the microfinance institutes and the impact that these institutes could see. First up, let's also talk about Maharashtra. This is a state where there has been quite some chatter of similar farm loan waivers happening. And remember, this is a state that heads to elections later this year. So a populist measure like this could also be expected to come out of Maharashtra. Now, microfinance institute exposure in Maharashtra is higher at around 8 to 10% of AUM. This is according to March 2024. MFI exposure in Telangana is minuscule at 0.7%, and MFI exposure in Jharkhand is as low as 3%. So, well, this is how these various stakeholders are expected to be impacted.
Thanks for that, Snehi. Now, to discuss the impact of farm loan waivers on the economy, on farmers, the entire sector, we have with us Vinit Goenka, who's the Secretary for the Centre for Knowledge Sovereignty, and Dr. Narendar Pani is also with us. He's Professor at the National Institute of Advanced Studies. Gentlemen, thank you for making the time and joining us on India Tonight. And I'll ask you, Mr. Goenka, first, do you find that the farm sector now, the farmers, they're suddenly much more in the spotlight before and even post-elections now? What do you see as the possible reasons for this?
For inviting me, Vikram. Ram Ram to you and Ram Ram to my co-panelists and all the viewers who are watching me right now. I think this is a long pending issue which should have been addressed decades back. And loan waiver, even if it is not good in the long term, it is a necessary evil which has to be done in the short term. And I really don't know who will say that this is the last time the loan waiver will be given. But having said so, we never question when incentives are given or grants are given or set-offs are given or tariff rebates are been given to large industries when they are set up. So any industry needs a push. It requires stimulus, and I think this is the right time when this waiver has come in. I would rather say that in place of doing it in the piecemeal as a political gain, every time then there is an election, politicians, the parliament, the assemblies together should come together and decide what is the way forward. And once for all, either come out with a policy which will help the farmers or let this whimsus go on. If you permit me for one more minute, I'd like to tell you, the basic problem is we have more than 15.7 crores of cultivable hectares of land. But how many KVKs do we have? Not even 731 KVKs. So what is the ratio of educated farmers are we pushing down? And we are not addressing the issue in the wholesome or holistic way. Vikram, I think we'll have to today discuss about, is it right to give subsidy to the fertilizer company, or should we create a mechanism like GST where a DBT has been given for subsidy to the farmer, who in turn passes on to the FPO where he purchases fertilizer, so that actual subsidy has been consumed by the farmers. So these kind of radical changes have to be discussed today. And I thank your channel for discussing this thing right now.
Absolutely. So is this the right time for farm loan waivers? You'd say that it doesn't have to be at the time of elections. It shouldn't be politically motivated. But that's a lot of what we are seeing. Professor Pani, how do you read it? Is this the right time, or do we need to look at other provisions, other ways to help our farm sector?
You cannot expect the farmers alone to bear the entire risks of agriculture, especially when you have a policy in which, as the previous story on your channel just said, that you're going to ban exports when they are doing well, when the prices are rising. In other words, you're going to cut off their high profits. At the same time, you expect them to take the entire burden of a loss. That's clearly an unviable mechanism. Now, as I think Mr. Goenka had already pointed out, essentially you're dealing with a system in which you are going to get risks. Nowhere in the world, in any industry, do you have a free market. A semiconductor industry, you're giving a huge subsidy to a foreign player in order to set it up because we need it. So by the same logic, if we need production, if we need farm production, you're going to have a subsidy element built into it. The question is, how do you manage that subsidy? Can it be managed more efficiently? But the farm loan waivers are just a reflection of the fact that it is unviable to expect farmers alone to bear the risks of agriculture.
It's really true that, you can't restrict it to that extent when it comes to farm loans, because that's addressing one part of a problem. But one point coming through in a couple of reports, Mr. Goenka, reports by NABARD and the likes, is that the marginal farmers are not making the cut for banks in any case, the banks that give out loans in the first place. Following this waiver trend, banks do not want to give out small loans at all. So the loans that are waived generally go to those farmers who have already high credibility in paying back the loan. So how do loan waivers even make sense? Because you were speaking for it, so I'm just asking this.
What you said is on the paper, but actually if you ask me, few NABARD officers whom I talked to, or the other bank senior professional, they said this loan is a secured loan because anyway the government is going to repay to us. Otherwise, when they go out, we have seen big businessmen, some have flown out of the country, they never pay back. So it is not that only farmers are the people who ditch this thing. Rather, farmers are a guarantee where some government will pay back the money to the bank. But I would like to point 2 points here, which is very important, pertinent. Is the lab to land been practiced in India properly? Does all the inventions and all the research which is done in the labs, they do reach the farmer? Answer is no. We don't push them, neither the agriculture officers, nor the extension officers, nor the KVK take efforts to push that lab things to this. And secondly, what is the cost, logistic cost of farm to fork? Once a grain is produced in the farm, till it goes to the mouth, do we have sufficient number of storages, cold storages, logistic? Unfortunately, till 1998, nobody thought on building a road corridor or a Gram Sadak Yojana. And only after 2014, the push on the connectivity, where the lab to land reforms will go there, mechanization will go there, seeds will go there, input nutrition will go there, and vice versa, the farm produce will come out. So we will have to now think about, do we subsidize or waive off all the costs only on the farm, or put in the stimulus like, post-harvest technology. How do we increase the inputs, the seed inputs? Do we have a policy where we can push the required seed and micro soil nutritions? Do we also have, use of the geospatial technology? Now, we are one of the pioneers. We have a fantastic system in the ISRO and other ways where we can use geospatial technology to forecast the weather and the climate to the farmer so that he can use it in the advantage. So this all have to be discussed, and this cannot be addressed by a single state. I would urge through your channel to the larger political system that they should all come together and once for all decide what will be our policy for use of technology, whether it is lab to land or whether it is farm to fork.
See, push, if that has to come through, one wonders, because we've been an agrarian economy for such a long time, Professor Pani, one wonders why we haven't pushed this agenda so far and why we are restricted to election time, that we decide to do something about the farm sector. How important is it to have that kind of holistic approach at this point in time, and how much damage is it doing to our economy, not taking it beyond waiving farm loans?
Time the Indian agriculture was presented with a more comprehensive policy was in the Green Revolution. When you gave farm loans, you gave them the technology, and then you procured whatever surplus was there. That is no longer viable because you're no longer a food deficit economy. So if you keep collecting the surplus, you can't sell it. But the fact is we don't have a larger policy now. What you need, what such a large policy would involve, would include forward trading, which means you allow farmers to know the price that they will get when their product is available for sale. That will involve a more sophisticated mechanism. You have to have forward markets which are closely linked to the farming community, not far away in your financial centers like Mumbai. So there is a whole much larger pattern or much larger strategy that's needed, which takes into account multiple factors. You cannot do this in terms of treating them as segmented issues. So like you cannot treat the financial sector as separate from the farming sector. The financial sector is one that's supposed to benefit from taking risks. Farmers are people who do not want to take the risk. So you need the mechanisms that enable farmers to sell their risks to the financial sector. We don't have those effective mechanisms. So until we do that, you're going to end up putting the entire uncertainty and risk on the farmer. And that will, in a democracy, you will have to just simply write off those loans. And that's basically what's happening. And it happens at election time simply because it's a democratic pressure. At that point of time, you cannot afford to alienate them further. Between elections, you can ignore their plight.
Professor Pani, in your study as well, when you look at the contribution of the agricultural sector in recent times, it has seen a decline. Now, there have to be fixes to this, because what we are talking about today are just plugging the holes, as it were, but we're not talking about a larger policy for the farm sector. How much of an impact is this having on our GDP growth? Professor
You see,
Pani.
the fact that people are moving out of agriculture is a part of any development process, right? We are moved from, I think, over 50% of our GDP coming from agriculture, I think, around the time of independence, to less than 20% now. That's a natural process. The trouble is really that we have not been able to shift the population out of agriculture to the same extent. So that's the source of pressure, that you're getting more and more people dependent on the same per unit of production, of food production. And that's going to put pressure on just the basic minimum standards of living, particularly when the rest of the society is growing aspirationally and consumption is growing in all other sectors. So you're getting a completely unviable mechanism. You need to have, alongside the forward trading, a system whereby you can take people out of agriculture, provide them other jobs. And that is not happening because our growth is in areas that don't employ people who are released from agriculture. So we have a much larger issue, and I don't think we are taking a sensible macro picture of the challenge.
Mr. Goenka, do you agree? Because many of these farm loan waivers, they tend to throw budgets at the center and the state out of whack, because often they have to reach out to the RBI to bail them out as well. In those kind of situations, at this point in time, like you pointed out, we need a larger fix. Like you also said, the government will eventually pay, and that's how the banks are looking at it when they give out these loans. But clearly, someone is paying, and it is clearly affecting our economy. You'd have to concede that.
No, Vikram, I know that your audience is largely corporate who looks after the industry, and they may not like what I'm going to tell right now. But the way, any industry has been pushed by creating soft loan, soft interest-free loans, tariff reduction, grants, subsidies, free land, some stimulus has to be given. And as I said, we'll have to put in some alternate. Why not bring this KVK, Farmer Producer Organization, FPO, as self-help groups together under the extension officer or the agriculture officer and create a network like GST with Boo, Aadhaar and the DBT, whereby you don't give this subsidies to the large corporations, but you pass on these points to the farmer who can only utilize this while he's buying that particular input, whether it is seed, whether it is fertilizer, whether it is mechanization against his land. So it is geographically tagged, it is tagged to the shops which are available there, thereby making sure that this subsidy reaches the last person. That will save enormous pressure on the budget. Two, if we have been pumping thousands of crore rupees in IITs and other colleges just to create a viable educated force, why not push in KVK and decide that, how much is the hectares of land we should have per KV? We cannot have just 737 KVKs for such a big cultivable land. So what we have to do is think it holistically. And I think this is not an individual state which can think it. This has to be thought at the national level once for all.
With that, Professor Pani, in terms of the kind of loan waivers that we have and the subsidies that are often given to the farm sector that we see in union and state budgets, does that approach need to change drastically, or do you see more of that taking place even in July?
Yeah, I think as long as you're not addressing the underlying problem, you will have to give these subsidies. At election time, it becomes impossible for them to avoid it any further. But essentially, there is a case for that support. The issue really is that can that support be used more rationally? Can it be built into a system that transforms agriculture at a time when the Indian economy itself is being transformed? Can it be linked to a process where people moving out of agriculture can contribute more effectively to the non-agricultural sector? It's a part of a larger issue. As long as we see it in isolation and expect farmers to just take the entire burden of the risk, it's not going to work. Because you're going to be able to do that between elections, but at election time, they will be able to assert themselves, and which is basically what's happening now, election after election.
Mr. Goenka, do you think it's going to go beyond political expediency anytime soon?
See, unfortunately, you have to live with the reality that politics will impact everybody, and especially if there is a large chunk of the population, which is also the real voter. I don't know how many of your corporate viewers actually go and vote on the day of voting, but it's, this compulsion will be there. But I'm trying to bring your attention once again out of this compulsion is that have we done enough on the policy side for the farmers and the way the subsidies are being circulated or other push have been circulated? My answer is
Goenka, that these loan waivers are being offered, that we have not done enough.
No, loan waivers are knee-jerk reactions.
Exactly.
As I said, they may not be long-term good, but this is a necessary evil which we have to live with as a society. You don't throw your old parents out of the house to take care of them.
All right, but the need for a more holistic approach, that can't be overstated, and that's what is coming through in this discussion. Mr. Goenka, Professor Pani, appreciate you joining us and sharing your views on this rather important subject. Thanks for joining us on India Tonight.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, yes, thank you.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.